everybody, Ellie here for WhoCulture and welcome to week 4 of the ups and downs for season 2 of Doctor Who. This time we're going to be looking at Lucky Day. Before I go any further though, let's address the elephant in the room. No, this is not me. I would love for it to be me, but it is not me. My own mother turned to me and thought I'd been keeping some major secret. It's not me! Now before I actually continue into the ups and downs, I do want to take a moment and give an up to our sponsor for this week's video, Surfshark. Now just as the Doctor traverses all of time and space from the safety of the TARDIS, you too can explore the online universe more privately and securely when using Surfshark VPN. Now Surfshark also keeps you safe and secure when you're away from home as well, as your data is protected while using public Wi-Fi so you don't become a victim of identity theft or fraudulent purchases. So whether you're at the Interstellar Song Contest, a remote village pub, or the Planet Midnight, you won't need to worry about using that dodgy looking public Wi-Fi network. You know those ones where it kind of looks like someone just headbutted the keyboard? Yeah, those. And I don't know about you, but I often wish that I could access all my BBC iPlayer and Disney Plus content while I'm in another country. Well, with Surfshark, you can do just that, as you can change your virtual location while traveling and watch all the same shows and movies as if you were at home. So whether you're having a dance in France or a nice day in Norway, you can still keep up with your new episodes of Doctor Who. Okay, I'm sorry, I'll stop with the country puns now. Surfshark also offers 24/7 customer support and a 30-day money-back guarantee. And make sure that you also check out Surfshark Alert as well, which is a breach detection system that notifies you of personal data leaks. So click the link in the description or use code WhoCulture at checkout to get 4 extra months of Surfshark VPN. Thank you again to Surfshark for sponsoring this video, and now let's get into the ups and downs for Lucky Day.
This is meant for you.
Why?
'Cause it is your lucky day!
So we start this episode with the cold open of Belinda and the Doctor arriving in 2007 to do their vindicating, and they meet a young Conrad. Now first of all, let's give ourselves a pat on the back because we called that this little boy that we saw in one of the trailers was going to be young Conrad, so well done us, well done us. Now does anyone else find it really weird that 2007 is now considered history? This is like a historical time. They've traveled back in time to 2007. It feels like it was yesterday. It just feels so strange to me. But also, fun fact for you all, you're all gonna go, oh my god, you make me feel so old. I am the same age as Conrad because I would have been 8 years old in January of 2007. So if you want to imagine what Ellie was like in 2007 when series 3 was airing, just look at young Conrad there. And that would have been the same age that I was. Now, I will say that the first section of this episode, following the title sequence, very much gave me Love and Monster vibes. But I think we can all agree that this was perhaps a better episode than Love and Monsters. This is what Love and Monsters wanted to be. But Conrad basically fills in the Elton role in this instance. And there's a lot of similarities between Conrad and Elton, from meeting the Doctor when they were a young boy, to then stumbling across the Doctor and their companion, catching a monster when they're older, and then trying to track down the Doctor and find people that are close to him. And that's all similarities between Elton and Conrad. And of course, that is how Conrad then ends up meeting Ruby, inviting Ruby as a guest on his podcast. Which leads me to my first up for this episode, which comes a little bit later in the episode, which isn't to say that I didn't enjoy the first kind of 10 minutes or so, but nothing that really jumped out to me as, wow, this is an up or a down for the episode. The first instance of that was the scene after the podcast recording when Conrad and Ruby are having coffee and Ruby starts to talk about the Shriek. The whole tonal shift of this scene was really great. I love how spooky it got. The direction here from Peter Hoare was really, really good. I love everything about how this scene played out. The lighting changes, the music, the mist that's coming outside, it kind of changes to nighttime. The way the tension builds up in this scene is really, really good. In fact, this whole episode is really good for tension in kind of different ways. That scene later on when we're in Unit Tower with Conrad, spoiler alert, is also very tense. It's a very tension-driven episode. And not necessarily where you thought it was going to go, but this scene in particular I thought was really, really, really good. I loved the framing of it. I loved the lighting change. I loved the snap back into reality. I think It's one of those things where it could have been cheesy and it wasn't. I really, really liked it. Really great scene. And just going off of that thing I've been saying about this episode being more tense, what have I kept saying? For me, I prefer the episodes that have higher stakes, that are more tense, so instantly ticking that box for me, yes, you're doing something good here. So anyway, Ruby and Conrad, they seem to be hitting it off. They seem to be getting on quite well, and he invites her for dinner. Then we have this scenes where Ruby is talking to her mum, she's talking to her gran. I really like that we've got the return to these family-oriented scenes. I mean, first of all, Cherry Sunday just steals any scene she's in. I love the fact that she's Instagram stalking Conrad. The gran is Instagram stalking Conrad. My grandma was stalking someone on Instagram. She'd be asking me what to press. She'd probably end up like friending them or something. I don't know, I just think it's really funny. But these character building, relationship building scenes I think are so important because they are what make us care about the companion. They are what make us feel like we have a connection to the companion. And I will say that has been lacking with Belinda so far. We have had brief mentions of her parents in a few very exposition-heavy scenes. But for the most part, we don't really have any grounding connections for Belinda, which is one criticism that I would have of Belinda's storyline so far. Do I think her parents might be relevant in the future? Is there a reason we're hearing so much about them without actually seeing them? Potentially. But for the time being, I would definitely say that Ruby is not my favourite companion, but Ruby definitely has the better backstory, the better kind of family setup, the better kind of storyline so far, whereas I think I just vibe more with the relationship between Belinda and the Doctor. Anyway, Ruby is heading for a weekend away with Conrad and his friends, but she can't help but see danger all around her, in the flickering of lights, in anything that she deems unusual. She now is stuck seeing danger all around her. Which leads me to another up for this episode. I think it was really interesting to show this perspective of the companions who are left behind and then struggling to readjust back into normal life without being on constant high alert. Now, it's not really something we often see in Doctor Who. I think probably because primarily the focus is on the Doctor rather than the companions. And also usually if a companion is leaving, if a companion is staying behind, it's because the actor has left the show or is leaving the show. And so we don't really have the opportunity to explore what life for them is like back on Earth because the story focuses on following the Doctor's journey. So if a companion stays behind, that's sort of it. So I think it was really interesting to have this opportunity to explore the companion back on Earth and see what it's like for them to readjust. Now, when we have seen companions back on Earth in the past, they often tend to kind of pick up the Doctor's role and become the kind of superheroes. If you think about Sarah Jane Smith, kind of becomes an Earthbound Doctor. Torchwood, Martha Jones joins UNIT, you know, all of these characters tend to come back to life on Earth, and rather than struggle to readjust, they kind of pick up the mantle and become the Doctor of Earth. In a way. So I think it was interesting to explore this with Ruby, particularly because Ruby is so young. So she's kind of come back to normal life, and then the struggle of trying to blend back into life as a 20-year-old and have a boyfriend and have friends and just live her life when she's constantly aware that there are so many awful things out there and she can't help but see them in every aspect of life. And the thing is, when it does turn out that she had good reason to be concerned, or so we thought, she does then kind of adopt that Doctor-like persona. She tells everyone to stay indoors. She kind of takes control of the situation, but she's also scared. She's going out there being like, yeah, I'm going to do what the Doctor does, but she admits that what am I doing? I'm just on my own winging it here, and what am I doing out here? But I like that. It's more real than someone just stepping out there and being like, I can suddenly be the Doctor. So I think that was a really good approach for the character. I think, quite honestly, this has been my favourite Ruby episode since she arrived. As you know, I've been saying in the other ups and downs, but now we've had the introduction of Belinda. Ruby wasn't really my favourite character. I didn't dislike her. I just never really warmed to her that much. There was nothing really about her that I was massively gravitated towards. I didn't really buy her relationship with the Doctor, but I think this episode, definitely my favourite Ruby episode so far. And then of course she does have Kate and Unit to fall back on as well when she does have questions, when she has concerns, and she has them there to kind of give her some reassurance. You have Kate, and Colonel Sexy. Kate and I love that they're keeping up with this little fling that they've got going on, because I 100% ship it. And I was a little bit concerned that they'd have that brief glance at each other, that holding of hands in one episode, and it would not be addressed again. I was wrong, and I'm really glad that it's continuing. You know, it's not a major thing. Maybe one day down the line it might become a major thing, but at the moment, I like that it's just there subtly in the background. Go on, Kate. And then, of course, you have UNIT arriving to kind of save the day, and their arrival was so epic. It was like the Avengers turning up to save the day. I really loved it. It really felt like I was watching an RTD1 episode of Doctor Who again. Just the epicness of UNIT just walking like, we've got this, guys. Stand down. We're here to save the day. Which, of course, plays entirely into Conrad's plan, but at this point, we didn't know that. But I suppose that does lead me nicely into my Artron up for this episode. Which is that twist I did not see coming at all. I don't know exactly where I was expecting this episode to go. I did think for a while that Conrad was using Ruby to get close to UNIT, but not for the reasons that it ended up being. I was more thinking along the lines of using someone close to the Doctor to get close to the Doctor, if that makes sense. Like Elton did with Jackie Tyler in Love and Monsters. That's where I thought that this was going. And I was already thinking to myself, I don't like you. You're clearly just using Ruby here because you want to meet the Doctor again, and you know that by getting close to her, you'll be able to get close to him. And I was thinking, And I still felt like but for an entirely different reason, and a reason that I absolutely did not see coming at all. I was entirely shocked by this reveal, which is great. And then within the scene itself, which was a brilliant scene, I felt so many emotions. I felt the sadness of Ruby, the heartbreak of Ruby. I felt the anger of Kate, and I felt so much disgust towards Conrad and his friends for just how snarky they were, for just how the ickiness of them. Such a great scene. I think it was really, really well done. Again, highlight to Peter Hoare for the direction of this scene, because it was absolutely brilliant. And it really did get under my skin, the way that he was treating Ruby, the way he was talking to Kate, the whole persona change of the character. And so I guess that leads me really nicely into my other up for this section, which is Jonah Hauer-King, who plays Conrad, because he did an excellent job, because I really believed him as this sappy lover boy, and he played that really, really, really well. But he also switched into that snarky, horrible, villainous character instantly, and I instantly hated him. I've never gone from liking a character to hating a character so quickly in my life. Absolutely brilliantly done by Jonah Hauer-King. But also I think we probably should highlight as well the writing from Pete McTighe here, because we had a backstory for Conrad that really made us feel sorry for the character, and so that was really well done as well, because we just didn't expect that from his character based on the things we'd seen from him prior to this reveal. And then there are little directing choices from Peter Hoare with regards to Conrad that again just drew us into this notion that he was this harmless idiot, you know, spilling his coffee during the podcast interview, dropping all his notes and being really flustered around Ruby, not taking the antidote because he wanted to show that he was brave like the Doctor, all these idiotic things that all of us were going, you did what? Don't lie, you did it too. Because when he didn't take that antidote, I was watching with my mum, we were both like, you idiot, why would you not take the antidote? Are you stupid? So I think between the three of them, between Jonah Hauer-King, Pete McTighe's writing, Peter Hoare's directing, we had this really brilliant story created, and we were absolutely drawn in. Hook, line and sinker, they caught us. Which in comparison, I will say, compared to Jordan, absolutely knew there was something fishy going on with Jordan right from the first scene that we had of him entering Unit HQ. This is the issue when you have characters you've never seen before that suddenly become important. You're like, don't trust you. So I guess on the flip side, not so great handling of Jordan. He was always a wrong 'un. And I guess that does lead me into my only down for this episode, which is something I've been commenting with every episode this season, but I do still feel like there is a pacing issue. I just think a few extra minutes to kind of let things breathe, to give us a little bit more time with certain elements of the story would have been beneficial to this episode. I feel like once the big twist reveal came, it then felt like a bit of a rush to get to the end. almost as if they'd spent all this time working on the build-up and then suddenly realised they only had 15 minutes to close everything out, and then rush to get to the ending. And I would probably say my biggest gripe with regards to this surrounds Conrad's transition from seeking out the Doctor to suddenly hating everything about the Doctor and wanting to expose Unit. I almost feel like it would have been beneficial to have a flashback scene to his Unit interview. I know that we did see a kind of soundless brief clip of it on an iPad, but I think it would have been beneficial for us to actually see a portion of that interview in a flashback, for us to get a better understanding as to what triggered this change in attitude in Conrad, because I felt that it was a little bit confusing. I kept asking myself, he didn't always hate the Doctor as far as I'm aware, so what was it that triggered this? Oh, it was this interview. But I think if we'd seen a bit more of that interview, we would have understood that a little bit more, rather than sitting there confused and really trying to have to figure it out for ourselves. Now, obviously, there is the whole online misinformation, indoctrination situation. Ooh, I feel like I'm a poet! Which obviously was a big influence on his attitudes and kind of fueled that. But I do think that that was kind of something that happened after this change. It kind of, that fueled or added fuel to something that had already been triggered in him. And with regards to that whole situation in the plot, I'm in two minds, because I kind of feel like, as I say, I did not see the plot twist coming. I did not see that being where Conrad's story was going to go. So for that, I think they handled this messaging far better, because it wasn't something we saw coming. Having said that, once it then was revealed, it was a little bit like, oh yeah, of course. I was shocked by that's where the story went, but then when that was where the story went and that was who this character was, I kind of was like, why didn't I see that coming? But for the most part, I think this is probably one of the better handled messages within these stories. Mostly because it was a twist that we didn't see coming, but then obviously once it was revealed, they then kind of had license to be really, really kind of heavy-handed with it, because that was the point of the character. I wasn't mad by it. Mad by it? Mad about it? I wasn't mad about it. But I do still feel like even with that, Conrad's motivations and what caused that change in his mindset towards the Doctor did need a bit more exploration for me. And similarly, I kind of feel like the whole thing of Ruby's struggles would have benefited from just a little bit more time exploring that before the main event, so that we really got a feel for the struggles that she was having, for the paranoia she was feeling. Maybe just show us her experiencing that a couple of times prior to meeting Conrad, so it kind of builds up, rather than the first we're hearing about it is her telling Conrad about it. I would say that this is not the worst one for pacing, but I do feel like pacing is still an issue in these episodes. And really, for only 8 episodes a season, they should be an hour long. Anyway, Conrad does infiltrate Unit Tower, and he really, really pushes Kate's buttons. So, taken up Kate Stewart. Badass Kate Stewart. Honestly, I don't think I've loved Kate more. I love Kate Stewart anyway, but this scene was absolutely fire. I was literally shouting, come on, Kate! Yes, Kate! Especially when she stood in front of Ruby when Conrad pointed a gun at her, and she was like, don't you dare point a gun at her! I was like, yes, Kate, come on! Honestly, I just love Kate Stewart. She's just getting up anyway, but this scene in particular I think was really good. And what I find really interesting is that this whole idea of Kate pushing the boundaries or pushing the rules of what the Doctor sets was really, really interesting. And I think it served as a really good scene, or a really good example of how great a Unit spin-off could be. You know, this idea similar to Torchwood, like they don't necessarily do things in the same way that the Doctor would do it, but he's not there and they've got to make do without him, and sometimes that means they have to bend the rules. And I think that this was a really good example of how good a Unit spin-off would be. Now obviously we do have the war between the land and the sea coming, so I'm hoping that this is setting us up nicely for the kind of things we're going to see in the war between the land and the sea. But if this isn't the direction that goes in, here is me just pointing out, BBC, right there is a great example of what a Unit spin-off could look like, in a similar vein to Torchwood. Just bending the rules slightly, ultimately saving the day, but not always being able to follow the rules set by the Doctor to get the result that they want. And I just think badass Kate, yes. And then Conrad goes back to being a dick. And in this instance, well done, Shriek. He deserved to have his arm bitten there. He deserved it. I'll give a round of applause to the Shriek. And then things kind of start to close up. And this is what I mean. Do you feel like I've rushed to the ending here where it comes to the ups and downs? Because this is how I feel like the episode was. All of a sudden, it's the end. But we do have Conrad in prison, and he suddenly appears inside the TARDIS. Now, here is another up. We finally get a moment of anger from the 15th Doctor. I've been waiting for this. It's been brilliant to finally see a different side to this Doctor. Also, he didn't cry in this episode. There were no tears in this episode, and I promised that I would give an up in an episode that didn't feature any crying from the Doctor. Is it a bit of a cheat seeing as he's only in 2 scenes? Yeah, maybe, but a promise is a promise, and I said I would do it, so there you go. There's your up. The Doctor didn't cry. But as I say, I think it's really great to see this different side to the Doctor, this version of the Doctor. Almost that Time Lord victorious coming out inside the Doctor here. And I think he's a very protective and lovable Doctor. And so the instance here where he's angry at Conrad because he's upset Ruby really does make sense here. It's like, you've upset my friend, so I'm angry with you. And he lets rip on him. He really does not hold back in terms of telling Conrad exactly what he thinks of him. And I think the fact that we do have this great scene here almost makes up for the fact that in an 8-episode season, we have another Dr. Light episode. Having said that, I will admit that compared to 73 Yards, I think the Dr. Light element of this story worked better. I think part of that maybe is because UNIT played such a big part in this episode, and UNIT are such a great institution in themselves that they kind of can lead the show. I think maybe for me what wasn't so great about 73 Yards is a lot of it was just focusing on Ruby, and as I mentioned, she wasn't the character that I was particularly drawn to, so it was really noticeable that you were missing something like the Doctor, something like UNIT to kind of help push the story. But in this instance I think it worked really well, and I also think what really helped is that the 2 scenes that we did have with Belinda and the Doctor and then just the Doctor were relevant to the bigger picture of the series in terms of the first scene, or were important for the character development with regards to the last scene. You know, we've got a bit more about this version of the Doctor now. So I think that kind of, I didn't notice that this was a Dr. Light story like I did with the ones in season 1. So I think that's definitely a good thing. If you're going to have a Dr. Light one, you don't want to be really conscious of the fact that the Doctor's missing from the episode. Actually, also in this scene, what I think was really great is that we kind of have the answer to who told the Doctor Belinda's name, and it wasn't some big mysterious character, it was just some dick in a police cell. And I kind of like it when those things twist. Sometimes it's anticlimactic. The whole Ruby's mother was just someone ordinary, really anticlimactic. But sometimes it can work, and I kind of like that, oh, it wasn't some important Time Lord or the Master or whoever that told the Doctor about Belinda, it was just Conrad. And I think the inclusion of that helps us get an understanding of where in the timeline this takes place, because I did find myself a little bit confused why the Doctor could be there until I realised that this is before you've met Belinda. That was a bit confusing. And you know what? Here's another up here. I think Peter Hoare, the director of this episode, deserves an up, because I was just about to mention this beautiful wide shot of the TARDIS, of Conrad and the Doctor in the TARDIS. And I've mentioned quite a few things that Peter Hoare has chosen to do as a director of this episode. So I think, you know what, he deserves an up in his own right. This is probably the best directed episode of this season so far. It was really, really great. There's some little flourishes here and there that just make it stand out. Some really great choices. You know, you've got that kind of tilted shot up the escalators in the opening. You've got Ruby and Conrad's date, kind of was set up like this kind of classic rom-com. You've got Ruby isolated by the pub door when she's standing outside. The framing of that was really, really great. There were just a lot of examples of great choices made by Peter Hoare as the director of this episode, so well done. And then, of course, we do have Mrs. Flood at the end of this episode. But I think similarly to last week, I am losing interest in Mrs. Flood at this point. I think these little cameos are just becoming a little bit too predictable, especially because they're all coming mostly at the end of the episode. So it's kind of just like, oh, here she is again. And I was hoping that by this point, we're at the midpoint now, that we'd have a bit more to grip onto with regards to Mrs. Flood. So I'm just... I'm not completely disinterested in her, but I'm losing interest because I'm expecting more to be revealed from her, and each week we're kind of just getting the same sort of thing. So, not sure. Obviously, I do wonder if we're going to see Conrad again, though, seeing as Mrs. Flood did release him from prison. So is he going to come back and be important further down the line? Is he going to be in league with Mrs. Flood now? So there are still some mysteries, some questions, but I just think for the most part, it's getting a little bit old now. I want something a bit more interesting to happen. Even just putting these Mrs. Flood cameos in at a different point in the episode so it's unexpected. You know, keep us on our toes, but at the moment it's becoming a little bit predictable. Overall though, this was an episode that, again, far exceeded my expectations. If I'm honest with you, I went into this one kind of expecting it to not really do much for me. Probably because I knew that it was going to be a Ruby-heavy, kind of Belinda Doctor light story, and as I've mentioned, Ruby isn't a character that I've been particularly drawn to. But I actually really enjoyed it. It kind of felt like it could serve as a soft pilot for a unit spin-off, which was great. I really liked the bait and switch with the whole Conrad situation. Totally didn't see that coming, and I like to be surprised by things in Doctor Who. I don't want it to be predictable. I want something to completely shock me, and this absolutely shocked me. All of these episodes are surprising me with how much better they are than season 1. And I just hope they keep this up. I hope we can just continue on this upward climb and that these episodes are going to get better and better and better, which seems to be the case pretty much every week so far. So, yay! Make sure you stick around in the following week for our spoiler discussion and Easter egg video. Of course, we have all of those for the first 3 episodes out on the channel as well. So let us know in the comments down below your thoughts on this episode. Remember to be kind. Some people have not been so kind in the last few weeks, but we can be kind, people. We can be kind. In the meantime, I've been Ellie for WhoCulture, and in the words of River Song herself, goodbye, sweeties.